Good afternoon, everyone. A few weeks ago on November 11th, we celebrated Veterans Day. Have you ever stopped to think how many problems veterans face when they come home from service? I want to pass out a brochure right now that is going to cover some of the things we're going to talk about today. Okay. According to a recent RAND study, and RAND is a big corporation, and they've done one of the largest long-term studies of veterans that's ever been done. Their study said veterans see the following challenges toward assimilating into civilian life. Number one is stress and mental health problems, PTSD, depression, and thoughts of suicide. The need to bridge the gap with family and friends, lack of time to readjust to life. Next is social isolation, loss of military closeness, inability to relate to civilians due to challenges with or disinterest in sharing the experience of combat, and also college isolation. They have confusion about benefits and eligibility. They have high unemployment or underemployment. They have difficulty in translating military skills and experiences into the civilian marketplace. They have difficulty reintegrating into the workplace. Employers fear reserve deployment. The employers also concerned about the perception of veterans with mental health injuries. They have difficulties accessing post-9/11 GI bills and benefits. They have difficulties with disability evaluations and lack of support for families. They have underfunded or unfunded programming and not enough help in figuring out how to reintegrate the veteran. They have mixed feelings about having women-centric programs at the VA, and this is just a partial list of the things that were in this study. Today, we are going to talk about three of these issues. The first is job discrimination, and according to a recent article at the Huffington Post, the Labor Department and Office of Special Counsel accepted an unprecedented 1,430 new cases of alleged civil job discrimination against National Guard and Reserve veterans last year. In 2001, the number was 846, meaning that job discrimination cases are up over 60% since then. Second, we're going to talk about returning home, how it can affect the families. And according to the website NCCAFV, a Yale University research also found that combat vets were at a much higher risk for divorce, depression, and unemployment. And then finally, third, we'll talk about veterans' homelessness. And in a recent article at thinkprogress.org, it says that veterans are disproportionately more likely to experience homelessness. While they make up 7% of the general population, they are 13% of the adults who are homeless. If you look at the PowerPoint, we basically, the three points I just covered is what is on there for the introduction. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Kate, so thank you.
Good afternoon. Veterans have experiences in training, in working, and in war that most of us could never imagine. But when they attempt to reintegrate into civilian life and share their knowledge and skills, we often deny them this opportunity. Today I'm going to discuss how veterans are denied opportunities in employment by explaining what employment discrimination entails, why it happens, and what U.S. laws say about it. Let's begin by detailing what employment discrimination is. The Journal of Psychology in 2012 states, employment discrimination involves differential treatment and negative outcomes on the labor market for members of particular social categories, and it is widespread despite laws against it. The journal also points out that this is very closely related to in-group and out-group associations because of the familiarity that employers have with their in-group versus the preconceived ideas or stereotypes they have with many out-groups. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in Clay Clamp 2009 explains 3 difficulties that veterans have in securing civilian employment. The first is that veterans 20 to 24 years old have double the unemployment rates of their counterparts. This is 3 times the national average. Notably, however, minority veterans have better employment than non-minority veterans. Finally, veterans specialized in combat arms are perceived as less transferable and therefore less civilian compatible, especially in human services jobs, which is of course something that employers look very closely for. Now we know what employment discrimination is, but why does it happen? LNA, a number analysis can't find a job, explains how employers are looking for individuals who are employed at the time of their application, which presents difficulties for unemployed veterans who are in their adjustment period from coming back from the military and civilian life, and also for active military, who obviously their main focus is their military job. Clay Clamp explains how veterans, by having the label of a veteran, admit to having a minimum standard, the minimum standard for military enlistment. This includes education, skills, experience, stable work histories, communication skills, motivation, dependability, teamwork, and adherence to chain of command. They have also most likely completed their high school diploma or their GED, passed qualification tests, and met background requirements. Finally, the majority of veterans have lower socioeconomic status, non-college educated parents, lower grades, and no college plans, as these are all things that contribute to their enlistment in the military. The Journal of Psychology in 2012 explains how veterans often have cultural values that clash with what employers are looking for. This is again due to the in-group and out-group associations. Veterans, for most of us and for most employers, are seen as an out-group. We aren't familiar with their customs or their culture or what they've experienced in the military. And this makes it difficult for us and employers to understand why they do what they do. In view of how prominent employment discrimination is, let's look at the U.S. laws that technically make it illegal. An On the Legal Front article in 2014 explains how the Equal Employment Opportunity Act and Americans with Disabilities Act allow for protected veterans. These acts offer 2 things. First, they offer a goal of veteran employment. This is the percentage of veterans that an employer should have on staff. However, they also mention that it is not a quota, and employers are not breaking the law if this percentage is not met. The Federal Register in 2013 explains how Vietnam-era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act of 1974, which was amended by the Jobs for Veterans Act of 2012. Together, these are known as VEVRA. VEVRA does 2 things. First, it prohibits discrimination against certain classes of veterans, such as disabled veterans and veterans from a certain time period, such as Vietnam veterans. Secondly, it sets out a plan of affirmative action to, quote, employ and advance in employment these veterans. Overall, today I have described what employment discrimination is in relation to veterans, what factors contribute to it, and what makes it illegal. We may not all know a veteran or an active military member, but all of us today sit here in peace because of their contributions to our country. So we should take the time to consider how we are treating these heroes. Now that you have seen what employment discrimination looks like for veterans, let's turn to Caitlin to see the family impact of returning veterans. Oh, and I apologize, this is my handout, and it covers some of the things in more detail that I went over.
everyone. We can all understand the worry of family members separated from loved ones as they serve their country. But what many of us don't realize is that it can be just as worrying and stressful for them when their families do reunite. I've done research over this over the past few weeks, and I've found lots of studies with information about this. So, when veterans return home, the initial reunion is often very happy, but problems often occur between them and other family members. So today I'll be telling you about the initial reunion, problems common between spouses, and problems between returning veterans and their children. And here is my handout. The cover of it says problems for returning veterans in their home life. It's a little hard to see because it didn't print correctly, but the rest of it's easy to read. And so, to start off, we will be discussing the initial reunion when the veterans return home. So, for the initial reunion, spouses and children are often excited for their loved ones to return home, and the veterans excited to be home. But problems do happen because they have to get used to being with each other again after the time apart. Veterans often have great difficulty adjusting back to civilian life, which can affect their whole family. In a poll done from PEW Research Center, 43% of veterans ranked their return home as very easy. 29% said somewhat easy, 21% said somewhat difficult, and 6% rate their reunion with family very difficult. Due to veterans' problems with adjusting back to civilian life, it can often cause problems between them and their spouses when they return. So, then there's common problems between veterans and their children. From CBSNews.com, it's estimated that as many as 5 million adolescents have had a parent or sibling serve since 9/11. The vast majority of the kids and families, even with a lot of deployments and a lot of moves, about 70% or more are doing fine. However, many children have problems and can develop depression when their parents return home different from how they used to be. And a study done found that 1 in 4 military kids consider suicide, which is a much higher rate than in other kids. And for problems between returning veterans and their spouses, they often feel like they don't know their spouse after such a long time apart. And there's a much higher divorce rate for veterans and their spouses than just civilians. And for veterans with PTSD, they're 3 times as likely to be divorced more than 2 times. And then in closing, I told you about the initial reunion, problems between spouses, and problems between returning veterans and their children. Many people think hardships for veterans end when they get home, but they don't. It is hard for them and their families to readjust to being back in each other's lives. So show compassion for any veterans you know. Not only have they had a hard time serving their country, they also face problems when they're back with their loved ones. And thank you all for listening to what I had to say, and here is Autumn to present our next point.
Good afternoon, everyone. Veterans are a very important part of this country, and not many people realize just how many of them end up homeless each year. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the statistics of homeless veterans in America, why veterans end up homeless, and organizations that help homeless veterans. Let's start with the statistics of homeless veterans. According to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the majority of homeless veterans are male, with 8% being female. They usually suffer from substance abuse or some type of mental illness or some other disorder. The majority of homeless veterans are single and live in urban areas. According to the annual homeless assessment report, homeless veterans tend to be younger on average. Approximately 9% of homeless veterans are between the ages of 18 and 31, and approximately 41% of homeless veterans are between the ages of 32 and 50. According to the annual homeless assessment report, about 12% of the adult population are homeless veterans. It is impossible to get a flawless count in a transient population because you can never count all the homeless people. But the estimated amount of homeless veterans in the United States is 57,849 people. 60% of veterans were located in shelters or other transient homes, and the rest of the other 40% remained unsheltered. Now that we have discussed the statistics of homeless veterans, let's talk about why they end up homeless. Tahina and a community mental health journal stated that there is a large, complex set of factors influencing all homeless, such as affordable housing, livable income, and healthcare. Veterans have many reasons they could end up homeless. A large number of homeless veterans live with mental issues such as PTSD, depression, and many other ones. Some of them suffer from alcohol or substance abuse to help cope with their issues that they have. The majority of homeless veterans suffer from a lack of social and family support. So either they're divorced, they lost their family, or they never really had one. One major problem that some veterans face is that the training and occupations they received in the military isn't always able to be transferred into the civilian workforce. That places them at a disadvantage with getting employed because they don't have any training to help them with that, and it's really hard for them to adjust. Now that we have discussed the reasons why veterans end up homeless, let's talk about the programs that assist homeless veterans. The main program that takes care of homeless veterans, and is also where all the other programs branch off of, is the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, also known as the VA. The VA specialized programs provide health care to about 150,000 veterans, and other services to about 112,000 veterans, homeless or otherwise, each year. They also give compensation and pension benefits to over 40,000 homeless veterans each month. By partnering with other programs and communities, the VA has managed to secure over 15,000 transitional beds and 30,000 permanent beds for homeless veterans throughout the United States. Other programs that assist homeless veterans include the National Call Center for Homeless Veterans, Healthcare for Homeless Veterans, also known as the HCHV, drop-in centers where they can just drop in and stay for a night, the VBA, VHA, Special Outreach and Benefits Assistance, VBA's Acquired Property Sales for Homeless Providers, and VA's Access Property for Homeless Veterans Initiative. In conclusion, today I told you the statistics of homeless veterans, why veterans end up homeless, and the organizations that help them. A veteran or the active duty military are the reason we live in freedom. Next time you see a homeless person, don't automatically judge them. They could have been one of the people fighting for your freedom at one time. Now that you've heard about the homelessness of veterans, Jamie Wilson will wrap things up for you. And this is my brochure.
Hello class, now you've heard about how veterans face job discrimination, their family lives, and homelessness. Fortunately, there are things you can do to help out, and I will be talking about what the VA is, how to volunteer, and where to donate. First, what is the VA? The VA is the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, which Autumn talked about briefly, and it started out as the Veterans Bureau and was created in 1921. The GI Bill, which was passed in 1944, is intended to give veterans many different benefits, and the VA is in charge of distributing those benefits. They are active in every state. Now that you know what the VA is, I will tell you how you can help out. There are lots of ways to volunteer, as was stated earlier, and veterans can face many problems. One way you can help out is to go to any VA facility or go to the website va.org, or .gov, to select a program to volunteer for. There are several programs through the VA and the President's United We Serve program, which include the VA Homeless Veterans Program, the According to the VA, it is the only federal agency that provides substantial hands-on assistance directly to homeless persons. The VA National Cemetery Administration gives deceased veterans a proper and decorated gravesite. The VA Volunteer Transportation Network provides veterans a means of transportation to and from authorized facilities to receive benefits. And the VA Welcome Home Celebrations sponsors welcome home events for veterans returning home and for their families. And they also provide important information on benefits they will be eligible to receive once they get home. But not everyone has time to volunteer though, so those of you that wish to help also have the option to donate. One place to donate is the VA website, va.gov, and you can select which facility you want your donation to go to. 100% of your donation is given to the facility of your choice, and it can be done at a facility as well. And every little bit helps. Now to wrap this up, you have now heard my group members talk about how veterans face job discrimination, their family lives, and homelessness, and I have told you about what the VA is, how to volunteer, and where to donate. I hope you now understand more about this important issue and maybe even want to volunteer or donate to help those in need. I will end this with a quote from President Lincoln. "Soldiers, I am exceedingly obliged to you for this mark of respect. It is said that we have the best government the world ever knew, and I am glad to meet you, the supporters of that government. To you who render the hardest work in its support should be given the greatest credit. Others who are connected with it and who occupy high positions, their duties can be dispensed with, but we cannot get along without your aid. While others differ with the administration, and perhaps honestly the soldiers generally have sustained it, they have not only fought right, but as far as could be judged from their actions, they have voted right, and I for one thank you for it. I know you are en route for the front, and therefore do not expect me to detain you long, and will therefore bid you good morning. Thank you for your time."